Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Oxwide. Today I'm at Queen Mary's Hospital in Sidcup, and before we get into this week's interviews, I wanted to say a few things about what's been going on at Oxleas. We're approaching the end of August, and next week schools go back, and that's going to mean quite a lot of adaptation for a number of us. Those of us who've got children who are going back to school will have to deal with what happens when there's the inevitable wrinkles around COVID and what that means for staff, and we'll remember that at the start of the pandemic the isolation guidelines pose problems for teams. So make sure you keep in conversation with your manager, keep an eye on the Ox and find out what the latest guidance is. It also means that we are expecting to see demand increasing on a number of our services. I was discussing earlier today with some colleagues that 3 regions in England now are seeing A&E attendances back at pre-COVID levels, and indeed higher than this time last year. That hasn't hit London yet because we haven't seen the commuters and the tourists we'd usually see in August, but we certainly need to be ready to face a pretty challenging couple of months ahead. So as I said, it's important that we recognise that this will be another period of uncertainty and that we keep in close contact with each other, virtually, not physically, and keep an eye on the Ox for the latest updates as and when we get some more issues arising because of the pandemic. One or two other things to be aware of. We've got some more work that's been going on in building a fairer Oxleas. You heard about that from me last time and from Andy Trotter and Rachel Evans. There's now been our first newsletter out updating staff across the Trust about what's going on with that. So make sure you take the time to read about that, what it means both for all of our staff as well as our BAME staff when we talk about building a fairer Oxleas. Finally, I just want to mention our Staff Recognition Awards. Everyone's done a tremendous job this year, but as ever, we want to celebrate those people who have made an exceptional contribution to Oxleas' work this year. So do make sure you nominate your friends, colleagues, or teams you've worked with for the Staff Recognition Awards. The deadline is the 31st of August, and information as to how to nominate is on your screen now. Moving on to today's programme now. Earlier here at Queen Mary's we were paid a visit by James Brokenshire, local MP for Old Bexley and Sidcup and Minister of State for Security, and of course a long-time supporter of this hospital and of Oxleas. He was here to meet and thank some of our volunteers who did a fantastic job during the pandemic, and I had a conversation with him about his experiences of 2020 so far. Good to see you, James.
Good to see you as well, Mathe.
Here at Queen Mary's today. So tell me about your experience during the pandemic this year.
Yes, I think it's been an incredibly challenging period for so many people, and being a Member of Parliament and sort of picking up on the challenges that people have been experiencing, the real impacts on people's lives. But also the thing that struck me enormously is just that strength of community. People giving their time, volunteering, looking out for others, looking out for their neighbours on what they might need, the support for those who may be vulnerable and are looking almost like for a lifeline to have that connection out to the outside world. And so that rallying around, I think, was just so striking. We know that there are issues that lie ahead that need to see that we continue to follow the guidance, maintain the social distancing, all of those things that prevent the transmission of the virus, ensure that we don't end up with a second spike. But I think it is that sense of people being able to meet those challenges and profoundly looking after others, and of course the extraordinary efforts and the extraordinary work of our NHS. To see what so many did and continue to do, and the difference that made, whilst recognising the extraordinary issues that we were all dealing with and that uncertainty. It is humbling, it is inspiring, it, I think, really showed and shows the NHS at its best, and how with, yes, the weekly clapping, but how I think we still need to reflect on that contribution and the amazing work that continues to take place. I can see that there are things that have been clutched here, so I'm just going to, rather than me gossiping, and the main thing is to say thank you, because I find it just so humbling and inspiring to meet volunteers, to meet people like you who choose to do this, who give up their time, who are looking at helping others and making that difference. And clearly you have been doing that through this really, really challenging period. And so, as a community representative, just thank you. thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do, because it does make such a difference in the lives of the children and the families that you clearly touch. And I think in some ways you are representative of that, and that's the point of saying thank you to you. It's a wider thank you to everyone who is doing similar roles in the way that you've done. But
share the biscuits.
Well,
that one's for Bob.
Very good. Right, Bob. Thank you so much. Thank you. But yeah, bless you. Yeah. They're sort of specially healthily designed biscuits, you know, I hasten to add.
And we're now heading for what's going to be the winter. We've got schools going back next week. Life's starting to return to some kind of normal, but with some important differences.
Yes.
It's going to be quite tough, I think, for the NHS, but also for social care. And what's the kind of thing you're hearing from your constituents, and what can we do as the NHS to help with that?
I think that there's still that sense of giving people confidence to ensure that if they have a medical appointment, that they take it. You know, it's there for a real purpose, and as I know, the steps that are put in place to make sure that hospitals are COVID secure environments for people who may be coming for outpatient or diagnostic appointments, and just how important that is for things like cancer. You know, I had lung cancer just over 2 years ago, and the diagnostic aspects of that, the continued checkups, are just so vital. So to be able to give people confidence and that clear message of, if you've got an appointment, please, please, please do take that up. But also knowing that the NHS is there, that if you've got worries or concerns, recognising, yes, the pressures that we always feel during the winter months. I hope that we'll see with things like a wider application of the flu vaccination, that people, again, if they get a letter, if they're invited to come forward for a vaccine for their flu, that they do take that up. Because again, it's about what we can do to keep the pressure off the NHS, which is why still being very conscious of the public health requirements is so essential. Yeah, I see that the change that we've had at the hospital, the ebbs and flows over the last number of years, but now how this is such an essential healthcare facility, providing world-leading care for people in Sidcup and across the whole of southeast London. And that's something that we have got to maintain and equally see what more we can continue to do here. You know, we have the cancer unit, we have the kidney centre here, we have this new eye specialisation that is on site here, and the amazing services. But equally, what more we can do to support some of the community services, what more we can do around our elderly care as well, where a site like this, with some of the facilities that are already in place, how we can do more, as well as on things like diagnostics as well, seeing that people don't need to travel further, go up to a hospital in central London for a diagnostic, a procedure that could identify further assistance that they may need. So I think there's still work that clearly we've done, and the amazing efforts that Oxleas have put into, I think, really secure and stabilise this hospital with the amazing stuff that already happens, but equally still having ambition, still thinking about what more we can do. And I'm certainly keen to work with you and Oxleas and other NHS care providers to see how we can bring even more to Queen Mary's, and therefore serve our public, serve the community here to a greater extent, and seeing this amazing world-class care that absolutely we have here in Sidcup, well, challenging ourselves as to what more we can do.
Thank you very much, James. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew.
And great to catch up with James Brokenshire there. Now, earlier in the week, Lisa Tan made a trip over to Norman Park in Bromley, where she met Warren Dunkley and Kim Braybrook from Bromley's Community Mental Health Rehab and Enablement Team. Now, Storm Francis turned up as well, as you can see, and I think we've got some of the tail end of it falling on my head here. But in true Oxwide tradition, the show went on. Over to Lisa.
I'm in Norman Park today in Bromley, a very windy Norman Park, and I'm joined by Warren and Kim from our ComRes Occupational Therapy team, and we're here to talk about what they've been doing recently with the service users. So Warren, could you tell us what you do in ComRes and who it's for?
Yeah, hi Lisa. Bromley Comrades, we work with a rehabilitation team within Bromley. So we work with clients trying to work on their functional ability, creating more independence for them, and we work with it's working age adults all across Bromley.
And why is it important what you've been doing and keeping it going through the pandemic?
Well, through the pandemic, a lot of the clients that we work with, they're fully engaged. Normally in their normal kind of week, they're doing groups and activities probably 3-4 times a week. So when the pandemic hit, we knew that a lot of our clients would then have a reduction of their social contacts and their kind of structure within the week. So we knew it was going to be important to try and provide something that they could still come out, meet with people, still get engaged with some activities, and kind of try and keep some kind of normality going.
Yeah. And you've recently received an award, haven't you, for your work during the pandemic, going above and beyond, I think it was.
It was from Ambient Housing, because I also care coordinate in my role. And when I was doing that role, I was going into supported accommodation where some of my clients are housed, and we was doing some groups within the accommodation in the garden, remaining kind of socially distanced. And just kind of trying to maintain their stability as through the pandemic.
So I reckon that must have been really nice to be recognised.
It was wonderful. Way. Yeah. It was totally unknown. I went round there just as I normally do within the week, and I could see something was up, and then the manager come out, and there was 3 or 4 staff members. Yeah, and they awarded me the award. So yeah, it's very
really
nice. Nice to be recognised.
Yeah.
Kim, could you tell us a little bit about what you do with Warren?
Yeah, I mean, I work very closely with Warren, and so between us we've been trying to, from the beginning of lockdown, we've been trying to find things for our service users to do outside now that their usual pattern of courses and things that they attend to during the week were no longer existing. So we started off, I think it just happened initially, we started sending out isolation packs in the very early days, and then thought, well, there must be something that we can do in the community where we can social distance and get people out. So we started from organising out and about groups in 3 different areas of the borough each week, exercise groups, shopping groups. We was doing yoga in some of the group homes' gardens. We started a small allotment group, which is still going, even now, and just trying to encourage our service users to get back out and just, get used to the fact of what it's like after the COVID, after the isolation, to try and make them aware of the social distancing and how to protect themselves, using like masks and that kind of thing, really.
So I imagine it must have been a real lifeline for some of the service users, because being stuck at home, I'd imagine, can be a real challenge for a lot of them.
I think it was, but I think in fairness to not just us but the whole of the Cameras team, we've managed to keep our service users out of hospital. So that, I think, really shows it all, just how beneficial this has been to them. And it's not only the OT, but I think that's just big thanks to the whole of the Cameras team.
Sounds like it's been great for people as well. And we can't finish, Warren, without asking you about your previous Oxleas Recognition Award. We know you were a winner last year, and can you tell us how that felt and what it was like to receive your award?
Do you know what? Again, that was fantastic to receive that award. To be recognised, with even if the team or across the trust, just gives us, just recognition, obviously, that what we're doing is working, which is fantastic. It helps as well. My manager's so supportive of what we're doing as well, so it just gives us encouragement to crack on what we're doing, and knowing that it's being recognised from the top down as well.
Great. So you'd really encourage anyone to nominate colleagues, anyone who's gone the extra mile,
100%.
Put them forward.
100%. There's so much good work going on out there that I think, like myself, we don't bang the drum about what we're doing. We just crack on with it. And I think there's a lot of other teams that have got fantastic staff members that are doing stuff above and beyond that need to be recognised, because they won't put their hand up and they won't shout that they're doing it. So it's really good.
Lovely, thanks very much, Warren and Kim. Okay, so that was great to talk to Kim and Warren here at Norman Park, and we're now going back to Matthew at Queen Mary's Hospital.
I'm here at Queen Mary's Sidcup with Debra and Nazia, two of our speech and language therapists. So, been an interesting year, Debra. Tell me how you've managed to care for some of the more complex people that we've looked after during the COVID period.
Yep, so we've had to adapt very quickly and learn very quickly on how to change things, particularly at this point where children are going into school and transitioning. So our school teams and our specialist teams have been working really hard. So for the preschool complex needs, we've had to change to do virtual, if not capable, then coming into face-to-face. So that we can prepare them for school and make sure the schools have got as much information as possible. We've contacted all the Senkos and offered virtual appointments like meetings so that we can ensure that transition goes well. Our hearing impaired team have run their summer intensive therapy blocks virtually, where normally they do that in school. The parents really liked it, but they were every day and they were really good uptake with that. Our special schools have had to adapt because not being able to get in and see the children. They've done a lot of training sessions with the staff to empower them and upskill them, but also with the parents so that they can work with the children at home, so that they can still continue developing their language skills. We've introduced Twitter, which is being done on a daily basis, kind of working towards activities for the children going into school. So it's been quite a big learning curve for us all.
I mean, I joined one of the summer schools, the virtual summer schools, a couple of weeks ago with Rebecca and a couple of other colleagues. Mm-hmm. It's such an important window, isn't it, that 2 to 5 year old period?
Yeah, so it's kind of making sure as well that when they go into school, they get the staff know what targets they've got so that we can make sure that transition goes well and that it's a success for them in school, especially in mainstream. Because there's such a big curve for them, so it's important to make sure that everything's in place that can be to help support them when we'd normally do that face to face and go in, but we've had to offer it through virtual to make sure that that can still go ahead really well for the children. And
of course, Debra, you work in Bexley. Nazia, you work in our Greenwich team. Tell me a bit more about what we've been doing for children once they reach school age.
Yeah, so following on from what Debra was saying, we've also had to adapt our groups. So every year we run 2-week-long summer holiday groups, one for nursery age children who are about to start reception and one for our year 6 children who are about to start secondary school. So of course we'd have to, change everything to virtual, and it took a lot of planning and hard work, but it was a success. We've had to just replicate everything that we do, but in a virtual platform. So for the younger children, this meant doing lots of language enrichment activities, using key vocabulary and familiar stories through video, which meant that the parent and carers were able to sit in and observe and see exactly what we were doing and then carry that on at home. For our year 6 children, they had what we called 3 lessons per day, which they logged on to, and these were very structured lessons which they covered topics, all things to do with starting secondary school. So how to make new friends, how to deal with bullying, how to deal with new homework, new teachers, reading a school map and a timetable, and of course practicing interacting with new children, albeit in a virtual way, but it's still a nice way for them to practice those social skills. A lot of our sessions were also co-run by occupational therapists and music therapy, so it was a really nice way of us to work together as an integrated therapies team, which was really good. So of course, we would like it to have been face-to-face, but the virtual aspect meant that children were still able to access therapy in an appropriate way.
And I've noticed that speech and language as a profession, you've been very active in terms of using social media, both to communicate with children and their families, but also with each other as a group of professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great way to keep up with best practice and to share what's going well with other colleagues around the world, and particularly with other trusts as well. And for our service users, it's a great way for them to access our services and know that we are still available, we are still offering a service, nothing has stopped, so we are still there, and the best way to do that is by highlighting that and promoting that on social media.
And Debra, as a team, the therapists in Oxleas, you've been working hard to support each other this year, haven't you?
Yeah, we have, and again that's mainly been virtual, but we've managed to do weekly what we call virtual pubs, and that's really important for the colleagues who live on their own, so it supports them. So for the well-being, the mental well-being. That's been run every week, so you can join if you don't want to, you don't have to, but it's always there, someone to talk to. But as a team, we've also started up a weekly email, so it has like the key points that are needed for knowing what's going on around the service, but also on a personal level, what it's been like for each person. And that started off with just the team leads writing it, saying what their experience has been, and now the staff, the rest of the team have been really keen to take that on. So each week we get somebody else's perspective, which has been really good fun, seeing the photographs of the families, what they've been trying to do, what they've not been doing, because everybody's experiences have been very different. So we've had people who've got young children who've been very different to someone who's got elderly parents. So it's been really good to see and to support everybody to know, there is that way of expressing what's gone good and what hasn't for them and their challenges.
There's a lot of parents and children looking forward to the schools getting back next week, aren't there?
Yeah, I think so.
And I suppose what's been interesting is there's stuff that we hope we never have to do again, actually, after this, but there's a lot of stuff that I think we'll hope we can continue, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what doing the virtual groups have shown is that we can offer therapy to a wider range of families, particularly thinking about those who, for whatever reasons, can't access face-to-face therapy. It's given us an extra option. So it means that, in terms of accessibility and equity of services, we can hopefully try to resume face-to-face therapy, but for those that can't access that, we still have alternatives available. So we would like to continue doing a mixture of face-to-face and virtual therapy.
Well, it's been lovely to see you face to face here, and having seen you and your colleagues working so tremendously hard this year. Thank you very much on behalf of Oxleas and everyone who uses the service, and I look forward to finding out more about the work of speech and language over the years to come.
Thank you.
Cheers. Any NHS trust has to be prepared to listen when people complain about their experience of our services, and it's vital that we as a trust are prepared to look at what people tell us about their experiences and act on it. So we're going to hear a bit more from our complaints team now. I have to say, having worked in many parts of the NHS, I think we're blessed with a fantastic team here at Oxleas, so let's hear a bit more about the work that they're doing. Complaints matter because they're a great way to understand what happens when our services don't work for the people we care for. They matter to us as an organisation because it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to look at something that didn't work and to understand why it didn't work and to find out what we can do to get better at it. And it also matters to our regulators as well. They look to see whether we're the kind of organisation that takes complaints seriously or whether we try to sweep them under the carpet.
I've been using Oxley services since 2013. Been inpatient. I've used community services. I'm currently a member of Bromley Research Net. The impact of not having a complaint handled well is that you're feeling all them emotions of invalidation, hurt, rejection. They come in huge waves. It's like a tsunami of emotion that comes, and you just feel, why do I bother?
So once we've received a complaint or concern from somebody, we have a timescale of 3 working days to acknowledge receipt. We would normally try to do this by telephone, contact them in person to ask them how they would best like their complaint dealt with. We would try to also get a manager to call that person to see if we can resolve it quickly over the telephone, as opposed to going through meetings or letters. But it's all about how they would like it best addressed, and what would actually resolve it for them, what it is they're expecting from the complaints process or from raising concerns with us.
One of the biggest fears for people who complain, and I've heard this on several occasions from people I've met, and my own feeling as well, is that you feel that your practice the next time you may be able to access services, you're going to be seen as a troublemaker. You're going to have your treatment refused.
I think complaints are important from a clinician's perspective because actually it's a way of seeing our practice from the outside. I've done a lot of complaints and I'm fascinated by hearing about areas of the service that I've not been involved with, but also just getting service users' view on us is just really helpful in a variety of ways.
I mean, I realise that not all complaints are factually correct. In certain ways they've been investigated, etc., and the points raised may not be factually true or not factually accurate. But I think it's important that the person who sent the complaint in feels they've been heard, feels they've been listened to, feels they've been validated, and that it's responded to in a professional but caring way.
Once the complaint's been acknowledged and we've discussed with the service user or their family how they would best like their complaint taken forward, We would then begin our investigations. We would send it out to the director of the service that the issues have been raised about and ask them to identify somebody to investigate the complaint. That may be the person whose service it is, a service manager, or it's more likely to be somebody independent so that we can have a non-biased, independent view of what's happened in the service.
One of the things that I've found most helpful is actually a phone call. But that way you can have a conversation with that person, a two-way conversation, an adult conversation, and that person can feel totally validated. I use that word again, validation. I think it's so important. And they can feel they've been heard, and they can raise some points that maybe they thought about after they've written the letter and go, oh, I should have put that in. They can raise that. And it can sort of bring a closure.
I think it's essential that the person who raised the complaint is involved. And when I say involved, that means ringing someone up, arranging a meeting, having a discussion, because very often the complaints come from fear, they come from anxiety. And I think a lot of that is dealt with face to face. And I'll be honest, I'm using a lot of my clinical skills when I do that. So I don't see it as 100 miles away from what I do in my day job. But I really enjoy that process of just trying to understand the emotional basis of a complaint as well as the factual basis, because we need to take account of both, because many service users can experience fear and anxiety in using our services. I also think when you interview staff, you use the same skills, because people become very anxious when there's a complaint. And I just enjoy trying to make sure that it's a decent experience for everyone in that.
There often there's a lot of fear, both sides, when a complaint comes in. You know, someone's sent you a letter, complaining about you, so if they've sent in something which can be quite scary for them to write. You've met something, and it's fear meets with fear, and there's this problem there with fight or flight, and somebody you want to disappear off, and you don't want to reply to that letter and whatever. That can actually escalate the problem further. The problem can become even bigger. That person then complains to someone higher than you. You then get someone knocking on your door asking you questions. And I think it's important, meet that fear with fear and head on and have a chat with that person. And I think 80% of the time, you'll de-escalate the problem very, very quickly.
I think a lot of us worry about having complaints made about us. And I think being involved with complaints helps you to understand it's a rational process. But also it gives you a chance to make sure that the person who's complained and the staff have something of a compassionate experience. And I think if staff are worried about whether this is a fair or compassionate process, this is a really good way of making sure that it is.
I may come across when I complain as Mr. Angry, Mr. Upset, Mr. Emotional, Mr. Can't handle you to professionals. But what I would say is to all professionals involved in a complaint is humanise it, become a human, lean in, help that person, listen to what they have to say. And you can probably de-escalate it so quickly by just putting the human touch onto it.
Complaints are our chance to show that we do care when we get things wrong and that we want to learn from those mistakes. We do ask staff who are very busy clinically and operationally to make time to investigate complaints for us and to find out what's happened and to make that response. But it says something important about us as an organisation and about us as people that we take the time to do this.
I think what I would want to say to all of our investigating officers or anybody participating in the investigation of a complaint is please don't be afraid. It is just a fact-finding mission. That's what we're trying to do, is find out what happened, why did it happen, and what we can do to prevent it again. And then to share the learning amongst all of the services to make sure improvements happen.
One thing that's really important to bear in mind is also an opportunity for us to say sorry. To say sorry that someone had a poor experience with us. And we have to be clear, that's not the same as saying we're admitting liability. I know people worry about this thing, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with us as an organisation saying you've had a poor experience with Oxleas and we are sorry that this has been your experience of that. I'm joined now by Dr. Tom Clark, who's one of our two Deputy Medical Directors at Oxleas. Welcome, Tom. It's been an interesting year to join the Trust. I think you've been with us for 9 months now. And I've been asking everyone, what have you done during COVID? What I want to ask you, as you know, with your background in frailty and in geriatric medicine and stroke, is what should we be looking for as we head into the winter now?
You're right, Matthew. It's a really interesting time to join Oxleas, and not the typical induction you'd have in an organisation, but a really busy time, I suppose, over the last few months. And I think now we're at a stage where we need to look forwards about what we do over the next months and years to cement some of the important changes that are required and to build on some of the good things that we're doing already. So I guess if you're asking me what's next, I would say that there's, and coming up to winter especially, there's be immense pressures on the acute trusts. So the hospitals that are around us, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the Princess Royal University Hospital and Darent Valley, to manage their capacity. And so I think there's a lot to think about in terms of what we can offer in the community to reduce the pressure on those hospitals.
And I mean, you and I, we worked together at the Proof for a while, so we knew very much about the inpatient setting. I was surprised by how much the community has to offer when we came here. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd focused a lot on this when I was at the Proof, thinking about how we can offer more in the community. But it's not really till I came here to realise the wealth of Oxleas services and the immense talent of the staff that we have in our services. And so I've taken great pleasure in joining some of the different teams and seeing what they do. So within Greenwich, spending some time with the Joint Emergency Team, and within Bexley, the Rapid Response Team. And I think really those two teams are two of the vehicles for the organisation in terms of offering a different type of care at home and avoiding a hospital. I mean, if we think about the sort of patients they look after at the moment, those people who still require a diagnosis, a little bit unwell, but not requiring hospital, and these teams can manage those individuals at home safely and very well and avoid the risks of coming into hospital. The risks of hospital-acquired infection, the increased risk of falls, and obviously now the risk of COVID as well. So it's those sort of teams coupled with the district nursing team and the excellent care that they provide, coupled with the intermediate care units that we have both here, Meadowview ward at Queen Mary's and Eltham Community Hospital.
I mean, I think it is good. The winter's interesting, isn't it? Because you think about the usual stuff we get, the flu, the respiratory illness, norovirus, our old friend, that. You add COVID to that mix and you think about what's happening in the care homes. I think this will be a winter unlike any other. But it feels to me as though our services, they've been busy, but we've maintained a good solid core throughout it, and it feels to me as though it's going to be tough, but we feel quite well set heading into the winter in terms of intermediate care in the community. What's your assessment?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess thinking about the intermediate care units as well, now they've been under immense pressure over the last few months with the pandemic, and they've got through that through excellent teamwork, individual effort as well. And the terms of the capacity and the work that they've had over the last few months has been slightly different. So they've been treating patients who've had coronavirus. I think that will continue to some degree going forwards. But having that capacity to offer care outside of an acute hospital environment is really important. And again, thinking about the other community teams that we have, I referenced the rapid response teams. I think that's really impressive, both in Greenwich and in Bexley. So I think that over the next few months and years, we'll see an expansion of those type of services. I'm really excited to be a part of that.
And underneath it all, I'm very conscious as well, looking yesterday just with Sarah Birchall and the Bexley team at the workload the district nurses are holding just now. There's a lot of people who aren't in hospital. It doesn't mean their care needs have gone away, and I'm always struck when I talk to district nurses, they say, we keep going. We get more and more coming onto the caseload and we just keep going at it. There's something about how we support those teams who are carrying a lot of that work out in people's homes to make sure they can manage with this really high point of pressure this year as well, isn't there?
Yeah, Matthew, I totally agree. And I think this is something that we'd need to look at. You're right, the pressure has been immense. They're a very stoic group, a very highly trained group, and they've dealt with it. But when you take into account some of the factors you mentioned, so that the patients that are shielding and those patients need to be managed in their home environments, the fact that GPs have been less able to get out and about, so that's caused increased pressure and workload for those teams. So thinking about how we can support those individuals is important going forwards.
And well, all I'll say, Tom, it's been great to have you with us this year. I hope next year's a bit more straightforward. But thank you very much for joining us here at Oxleas, and thanks for giving us your reflections here today.
Matthew, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you to Tom Clark there, and thank you to everyone who's been involved in this week's edition of Oxwide. If you or your team would like to get involved in a future broadcast, please contact us using the email address on the screen. Do remember the Staff Recognition Awards as I mentioned at the start, and until next time, goodbye.